And here he is.
Hi, Brian.
Hello. Hello, boys. How are you?
Very well.
Brian. Thank you. And thanks for keeping to your word and coming back. I appreciate that. You know, we spoke to you a few weeks ago and you said you'll do this interview and here you are.
No, I wanted a cup of tea with Sam and Lee.
Good man. I like it. It's catchy, Sam.
How have we been? We all right?
Yeah, good. Busy, but good. So, yeah.
Brian, I've got a question for you, incidentally. Obviously you did an interview with us a while ago, which was great. But we obviously, you know, ideally we wanted you at Harper Adams University where we did our kind of Droid Builders UK, you know, in person. And, you know, I'm sure we will get back to that at some point. When
then you bumped me for Daniels, didn't you?
Well, that was Lee's decision, actually. That's a Lee special.
Wow.
But you know, I think you know, I think getting you in person is certainly the route forward, Brian. So you know, it's good. But how did you get into puppeteering? Is my first question.
Well, the short answer is I lied at a spitting image audition in 1992, and then 6 weeks later I was on television. I'd never picked up a puppet in my life, to be honest. I've been around them a few. I grew up in the theatre. My mum was a wardrobe mistress at a local theatre, and I'd been around puppets, and I liked the Muppets and stuff as a kid, as you know, we all did. But I was working as an actor and just stand up, and I was doing just a stage management, just jobbing around. And then my parents ran a pub in Hertfordshire, and there was a guy who drank in there whose son worked on Spitting Image, and I got talking to him one day, and then he said, I'll put you on the list for workshops. It turned out those workshops were auditions. I rolled up. They said, have you done any puppets before? And I said, I'd done a tour of Little Shop of Horrors. And I said I'd worked on a tour of Little Shop of Horrors, which was true because it had come through our local theatre and I'd moved the scenery. And they said, oh, it's very different from that. You have to hold the puppet up. You have to move the mouth in the same time as the track. And you've got to watch the monitor, and the monitor is like a mirror, so you use it like that, and then you have to, you know, hit your marks and do all that sort of thing. So they gave me a go at that, and then it turned out they were taking on assistant puppeteers. So I was asked, they didn't give me a job immediately. They said, can you come down and do some training? So I went down one day a week, which is actually where I met Patrick Comerford, because he came on, Patrick, who works with us on Star Wars quite a lot. And Patrick and I started at Spitting Image at the same time, both in the same job. And I went for a couple of weeks, just one day a week, and trained up on a Tuesday with people like Simon Buckley and Nigel Plaskett, who are great puppeteers. And then they came down and said, would you like 2 days a week on the show? So that they took me on, myself, Patrick, and two other guys were there for the first series I was doing there as a trainee. And then they just kept two of us on, and we kept going. And that's how I carried on from there. And from Spitting Image, I went and assisted, because really what I was doing on that was I was learning arms and eyes and just kind of holding up stuff at the back. I wasn't getting anything sort of really difficult to do. They were just training on how to do it. And then from there, I assisted people on their own shows, because Spitting Image at that time had the best puppeteers in the country, as it still does. So I was assisting those guys. And then from there, I started getting work in my own right, and I went up to work for the Jim Henson Company for about 10 years, and that took me into films, and then we wound up talking to you.
It's a low point, right? It's a low point.
Not at all. I can hardly contain my indifference.
Brilliant. Well, I love always finding out how people got into their industry, you know, because you take your chances, don't you, Brian? Let's face it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you never quite know. You never know where the next thing's going to take you, really. And I've probably got more work through having worked with people before, or chance meetings and that kind of thing, than you do from auditioning. And I always sort of maintain you get more work in the pub than you do in an audition room. You know, just through people you've met, or they like you, or you make a bond with them. Because a lot of the time people are hiring people they like. You know, it's that thing, they hire people that they think, oh, he was fun to have around, and he can do it.
Yeah.
You know, so hopefully you go on to jobs and try and be fun to have around.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I've not been back on Star Wars, I think.
Yeah, no, I was saying, Brian, it's taking the opportunities. It's taking the opportunities, isn't it? You know, when rather than walk away and wonder what if, you know, take the opportunity and find out what if. You know,
Yeah, completely. It's so true, and also it's that thing that I've sort of developed as I've got older is knowing when an opportunity is there, knowing what one looks like.
Yeah.
But it is again that very fine line you walk between being pushy and just trying to just be slightly forceful to find out if there is something there or if there isn't. But
right. Yeah,
you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
absolutely. And of course, you know, one of the reasons you're here is this led to you working on Star Wars.
Yes.
Your first Star Wars job being The Force Awakens.
Mm.
I remember you started just before me, and you knew that, you know, the fans were coming in, and you really kindly sort of took us under your wing, I felt, and you made us feel so welcome. Everybody made us feel welcome, but regularly checking up on us. And
well, I kind of, because I think you and I are both massive Star Wars fans, and Oliver as well, you know. And I think the difference between us, though, is that I'd worked on a film before, you know, at least. I mean, by that time, I suppose I started in television in 1992, but I'd been working before that, and I'd done some movies. But this isn't just some movie; it was Star Wars, and it was terrifying to come into that. And so I can only imagine what it was like for two people who had never done. I know you've done a couple of commercials, but never done anything like that. And it was, I mean, for what I always said to you guys, that you were the poster boys for fandom, in the fact that you've taken something that you were doing in your garage, and now suddenly you were working on a movie. But you weren't just doing that. I mean, for someone in the R2D2 Builders Club to be asked to build R2D2 for the movie, it's got to be the brass ring, right?
yeah,
So the weight of that must have been massive.
Yeah.
And so I kind of understood that, and so it was it wasn't lost on me. But you're also nice people, so it was very easy.
But very sweet of you. And you, I remember you and Dave taking us on set for the first time as well, when we were puppeteering and performing the mouse droids and the sentry droids.
Yes.
A number of them, so we sort of shared the work.
Yep.
And that was one of my most memorable sets that we worked on anyway, because of stunts and, you know, everything that was going on.
Big.
You know, it was such fun, and you and Dave kindly taking us under your wing was quite an experience. And just, well, look at you laughing. It was great, wasn't it?
It was a good fun day. It was a good fun day because as I seem to remember, we had a visit that day. That was the first day. We were all dotted around the set in various places. I was standing on the ramp of the landing craft operating. I was doing a mouse droid. And was it you and I were doing the mouse droids, and Oliver and Dave were doing the Omni droids? Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And so you only had line of sight on these things, so you had to hide in the set, and you were hiding behind a bunch of packing crates, as I recall. And we were on radio, and I just said at one point to Lee, I said, Lee, just stick your head up and look over towards the main dock doors, because I'd seen that Harrison Ford had walked onto set for the first time. And so I've just said to Lee, stick your head up, and I'm on my little radio. And Lee sort of looked up, and his face beamed, and he went back down again. And they just started to get ready, and Lee just thought he'd pick another quick look, and his head popped up and go, "Get your head down, Lee." It's like this. But, that was a good fun day. That I hit Oscar Isaac with a mouse droid twice, as I recall.
Which made the cut.
Yes, one of which actually made the cut. You can see just before they break left to jump to steal the TIE fighter, you see him leap over something, and he's actually going over a mouse droid that was queued too late because there were a couple of stormtroopers. And I'm sure the droid builders know this, and the 501st guys will definitely know this, is that you can't see anything under here if you're wearing a stormtrooper lid. So a mouse droid is just a football. You don't know it's there, you can't hear it. And so if those guys weren't getting queued, or if they changed the queuing, we'd have to keep our wits about us as to when we put those droids through the shots. And no one told me that those guys had gone early, so I was then stacked up behind them. So by the time Oscar and John had reached the point where I was supposed to have been gone, I'd hit them, and you see him jump over in the cut. So he's jumping over the mouse droid, but it's too late.
But you went and apologised to John, didn't you? I think that was your first communication with John.
No, that was Oscar. It was Oscar, because the other shot we were doing is the first time you see him coming off the lander. I had positioned myself where I knew the angles and everything I needed to go. And then I moved to get better line of sight. And of course, as you guys know, when you move around, it changes all the directions and it all kind of freaks me out. And I'm driving this mouse droid across, and I can see this stormtrooper. He's got Oscar. He's got his gun here. He's got his Oscar, and he's pushing him towards wherever they're going. And I'm looking at this droid and thinking, he's going to hit this. He's going to hit this. He's going to hit this. And if I turn, it'll draw your eye. And he just went straight over it. And so then I introduced myself to Oscar and said, "Yeah, hello, I'm going to be doing BB8 through this." And he just laughed. He's like, I'm not a terrible driver. It's fine. Just, that was my first meeting with Oscar Isaac. It was not what I'd hoped. Okay.
So we were talking with Jake just the other day.
The mighty Lunt.
And he said, you had some input into how BB8 was going to be designed and how, because obviously puppeteering is an art, and I think it's something that, as a builder, and obviously seeing you guys on site and on set and things, is, what I noticed is sometimes it's just those little movements. And, we get it as droid builders, but obviously you're a pro. So it was interesting, certainly when I had an earpiece in and I could hear you, the critique, you were looking at different things and we just need a tiny bit of movement here. Yeah. And that really, certainly when it gets down to film, that is certainly massively empowering. And Jake was saying, we were talking to Brian, we were talking to Matt, we were talking to Josh, we're trying to get this this droid kind of looking the way we want it, and the way JJ wanted it. Mm-hmm. And it was just quite interesting on how that went. What's your sort of take on the BB8 development?
Well, as far as the design is concerned, I only really had one tangible thing that I put into BB8 that I did that, and that was because we spent a lot of time with it on the desk, up on the bench. It didn't really show up until I did a camera test, and so I was on the Force Awakens as a puppeteer consultant from I think July 2013. So I did 16 months on that show. And we did a bunch of camera tests, and they needed to see the camera tests. This is before it even turned into a puppet properly. And so we took the maquette version of it and we put it on a little wheeled trolley. And this is actually, you see this in the in one of the documentaries. And so they were trying to work out camera sizes and lens sizes that you would need to have somebody standing next to something as big as BB8, because as you now know, he's not anywhere near as big as people think he is. And how wide your frame has to be to see as a person of average height standing next to BB8. Never mind Chewbacca, because that's just got to be a massive wide shot to see them both in the same shot. So Josh is pulling it along on a piece of string, and I've got my hands in my pockets and I'm walking along next to it, and the camera's just dollying along just to see what that would look like. And I looked down at it, and it was probably the first time I'd seen it moving as a thing. And I thought, it's about the size of something like a dog or a toddler. And that actually, once I sort of went, it looks like it could be the size of a dog. That actually affected the personality of it from then on in my head. And again, it's not necessarily, because obviously it's all in the script and it's all written there. But if you actually look, if you break that down, it's Poe Dameron has a dog. He puts something around the dog's collar and sends the dog away. Rey finds the stray dog, which she rescues. And then she takes that dog back to its owner. And that dog is then loyal to her and to Poe for the rest of those movies.
That's really interesting.
But when I was looking at it on the deck, its eye, if you obviously you've all seen BB8, so he's got that orange strip that runs around his head. Now originally, and that is broken by his eye. Now originally that went right the way around and the eye was lower. But the problem with that is when you've got something that short, it's always going to be looking straight out. And so it'll always be looking at between your knees and your groin, because everything else is that much taller than it is. So why would you build something that constantly has to have its head back to look at what it's interacting with on a regular basis? So I said, if they pull the eye up slightly, it will then have a kind of a fisheye lens, which means it's always looking up. Because from a puppetry point of view, if you then have to look up at something and make a point of it looking up, and you're already always looking up because the eye was too low in the first place, you've got nowhere to go.
Sure.
So we made sure the eye was up a little bit. So when it's at rest and the head is flat, it's always looking slightly up at all the creatures that it would generally be interacting with. And so we don't know in the real world how wide the aperture of that lens would be. So that way, if it does need to look up, I could just pull back on the little stick and it would go up, and it would then look up as we do, because with all of these things, you're trying to put human characteristics into things without a face. So just by having it look up or look down, left or right, a cock of the head, which again, I always say that R2, as fantastic and wonderful and lovely as he is, he did a lot of his acting in the sound edit, because with the performance that Kenny Baker would put in there, and then subsequently Jimmy and Hassan, they can rock it backwards and forwards and turn their head. And if you put a happy set of beeps across that, it's a happy performance. But you could take exactly the same physical performance, take the sound off, and then put angry beeps on it, and then you've got a completely different performance. But you've actually still got the same physical movements going on. But with BB8, because we had pitch and roll and yaw on the head, you can make him look shocked, you can make him look quizzical, you can make him look sad, you can make him look up, you can do all those kind of things, which you can't necessarily do with R2. Although I do think it's interesting that over the movies, with something as basic as R2-D2, the people performing it have found new ways to make it emote, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, Brian, I did become quite envious of you with BB8 over time, because JJ used to come up to me and like, how would R2 be happy?
Yeah.
And, feeling quite intimidated as the new boy, I didn't even think to mention about the sounds.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is really tricky, because I'm just limited to roll of the droid backwards and forward, turning, and head.
Yeah.
Whereas you had so much more in the bag with BB8, which was great. And that's, that's moving forward.
Well, the other thing as well that I wasn't afraid to do was that I was doing the beeps on set. So that was never really an issue for me, because I'd just make happy beeps at people and they go, okay, right. And if it was annoyed, I'd make angry short beeps and all that kind of stuff. So that would be going backwards and forwards. So it was easier, it was much more of a performance thing, I think, because it was a puppet. I mean, not obviously, I'm sure most people will know that there were many, many different versions of BB8 on those movies. And between myself and Dave and Matt Denton, we had different duties with different versions of it. So I would always be doing the dialogue whenever I was on set with it. So it would give the actors something to work to. Because I know that our friend Mr. Daniels was very happy with the beats that we was getting from BB8. He used to have quite a laugh with that. Did you play anything in on set? I can't remember, Lee.
I did for Rise of Skywalker, which Sam was lucky enough to witness.
Oh, right.
I'm just not comfortable doing that. I'm not the performer like you, Brian. So, to make the whistles and bleeps, yes, I did do it, but very rarely. And whether it helped or not, I'm not so sure.
It probably gave the camera crew a laugh, regardless.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, and the rest of the creatures department as well.
That day, that was actually in a cave, wasn't it, Lee? And we were there together. There was a thing that Anthony Daniels, he had to have something above his head so it didn't reflect on his head. And then the cameraman physically fell off his camera rig, if you remember that. Maybe you don't. Well, I have vivid memories of that, of course, because the short amount of time that I was there. But I do remember Brian beeping, and then JJ sort of going, "Come on, Lee, are we going to do this?" And you're like, "Woo!" It was a bit awkward.
Well, as an interesting exercise towards the very end, when we did a few pickups, JJ actually had me speak in English.
Oh, right.
And it went really well. And we just sort of thought, we probably should have done this from the beginning, because I would deliver dialogue and ask questions and actually have a backwards and forwards with the actors. But the beeping worked absolutely fine. But we suddenly found it jumped to a whole new level when we started doing it with actual dialogue.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, Brian, of course, BB8 kept you busy, but it wasn't just BB8 in The Force Awakens, was it? You were doing various other things as well as Puppeteer. Yeah. And various other characters you were involved in because of your consultancy you were doing.
Yeah, we were across quite a lot of stuff, really. Very early doors, I was in the back of the Lugger Beast, which is the thing that Derek Arnold and Tom Wilton wound up being, that Kieran Shah is riding in the desert when Ray first finds BB8. But that was the point where I was starting to sort of get the job of BB8, and I was taken out of that. And also it was getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and I'm just not butch enough. So we brought in Tom and Derek. But so I was there to develop and help with Paul Casey, who was doing the movement, and I was in there from the puppetry sort of point of view. And with people like Jake Lunt and Ivan Manzella and Martin Lazard and Luke Fisher, we were just working out how we could put people into different odd positions in creatures. And also I was sort of liaising with set department and creatures and costume, and just how we could, where we would cut holes for puppeteers' arms to go through, how we could hide people, would we need to hide people, that kind of thing. So I think the first thing, BB8 was the first thing we did in the movie, but then we also did the steel pecking bird that's on the metal tube when Ray rides into Nema Outpost, first of all. And that was, again, myself and Dave Chapman, who is my partner in crime on BB8, and we just tend to get paired up all the time to work together because we sort of share a sense of humour. And so we did that. That was just a rod puppet with some rod removal, but that was practical because that's practical. The desert's practical. The speeder was practical, and Nema Outpost was practical as well. And it was just such an amazing thing to see, to do that because we're out on location. What else did we do on that? I was in Maz's castle. We came up with this crazy idea for there's a fighting table, like a gaming table in Maz's castle, with these balls that are flying around in like they look like little kind of caterpillar things, and they're smashing each other, and just there's a few rolling about. And we did it with we came up with this idea that if we did them as rod puppets, we could have our arms going through people that would be at the table. We could hide, and then we could be wearing black or be wearing green, and then we could do it. And then we thought that was going to be a bit difficult, and then I suggested that we should probably be wearing costume because it was the easiest way I could think of to actually be in the film. So myself and Dave and Phil Woodbine wound up dressed in these crazy outfits, and you can see us, we're banging our fists on the table and doing various things, and it looks like we're really getting into the game, but actually we've got handles and rods coming out of our fists, which they just remove later. And so we're making the things fight. So that was one of the things we did. And there was, I'm just trying to think with The Force Awakens, what else was there? We did a lot of the mouse droids with you and Omni droids.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of stuff, all of which have now completely gone from my head. I think over the 5 movies, I've had something to do at any given point with 56 different creatures or droids over those movies.
Wow.
Even if that's just a couple of days on a face, or just some R&D stuff, working out how to do it, setting stuff up, but it's that was the last count.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Brian, with Oliver and I being the Star Wars fans, but of course you're the Star Wars fan as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it must have been just as amazing for you. I said in a recent interview, it's not just me and Oliver, the Star Wars fans. You walk around the set.
Yeah.
Most people love Star Wars. So, there's a lot of Star Wars fans there. And you collect yourself as well, don't you? You do have some Star Wars collectibles.
Yeah, I don't mind a Star Wars figure. I was that kid in '77. I had the pajamas and the curtains and all the Star Wars toys. I've still got all the figures. I kept all the boxes for my toys as well, so I've still got all of that stuff boxed. I mean, I play with them. I mean, all the cardboard's gone out the middle. I haven't got all that stuff, but I've got the outer box for the Death Star and all that sort of malarkey. I had a report. I mean, I've said this quite a bit. I had a report come home when I was about 10 that said Brian's obsession with Star Wars will lead him nowhere, and he should concentrate on his academic studies.
Wow.
I didn't, and it did. So, but stay in school, kids. But yeah, I've been a massive fan, and to have been. I mean, living the dream is a really overused term, but I do remember saying to Dave when we were, I think we were about 2 weeks in Abu Dhabi. We've been in Abu Dhabi for about 2 weeks, and I said to him, "If this is a dream, and I wake up, I'm going to be very upset for ages." Because to have been a part of it for a few weeks. I mean, we had people come in guesting on it like yourself, Sam, who came in for a few days or a few weeks and just had the time of their lives and said, I've been working on Star Wars. That would have been fine for me. Mm-hmm. But to be there for as long as I was, and for Neil to put the trust in me to have me as his puppetry consultant was fantastic. And then to be given BB8 to play with for the whole of that trilogy was definitely a dream come true, and for as a character, for it to be been so embraced was more than we could ever hope for. Because my thing for it was, I hoped that BB8 would be able to sit next to R2 and Yoda and 3PO and Chewie as part of that story, and you pick them up in a lineup and you just go, yeah, they're all from the same thing. Whereas some of the characters that we saw possibly in the prequels weren't so embraced, and they don't necessarily look like what I think Star Wars looks like. Whereas BB8 was fantastic, and again, that's such a testament to Jake and to Neil's guys and all the people who designed and built BB8 and Christian Orksman and all those people. The fact that BB8 was a brand new droid, but it looked like you'd seen him before, and he looked like he'd stepped straight out of that same world. But actually, when you stand him next to R2, he's very different.
Yeah, I suppose he is. Yeah, well, he is. Yes, yeah. Yeah. So of the collectibles you've got, Brian, do you have a BB8? Have you got a BB8 in your collection?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say there's some BB8 stuff.
But what about a full scale one? Have you got a full scale BB8?
I haven't got. I would love a full scale BB8. I would really love it. I must have chat one of you chaps up, see if I can get someone to make me one.
Yeah.
Because that's way beyond my capacity, and it's But I would absolutely, didn't even have to work. I just like a posable one, one that just sit with the head would move. But
yeah, they're a bit tricky to smuggle off a set as well, aren't they, Brian?
They're what? Sorry,
they're a bit tricky to smuggle off a set as well.
They don't like it. They don't like it when you back your car up and try and sort of load one in. They don't like that at all. But no, I haven't got one. And hopefully, if my move goes through, I'll have room for one as well. But it wouldn't. I don't think it would be good.
Nice.
But
what's your favourite collectible, Brian?
I had 2 Christmases where everything I got was orange and white, and it was just getting silly. So a lot of it has been put into storage. The one thing we've still got that's out is there's a whole line of pewter replicas. There's a lovely R2D2 and a C3PO, and the BB8 one is really sweet. We've got that, and that's sitting on the mantelpiece, and it's quite subtle than what it is.
Nice.
And so I like that one. What else have we got? The one something I'm particularly pleased with is the 3.5 inch scale BB8. I mean, smaller than that on the cards that they sold at the Disney parks, because having over the years owned literally hundreds of those, it was just fun to get one that you just go, oh, look at that,
Absolutely.
that was quite a big deal. Yeah, I just trying to think. I've got the Lego one. The Lego one's fun too. I built that myself.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah,
got that one. So.
That was last Christmas you built that, wasn't it? I think.
Sorry?
I remember you building that last Christmas, wasn't it?
That was last Christmas. That came out of my Lego Advent calendar, if I recall correctly.
That's right. Yeah.
It poured out the front of it on about day 23. It's all there on. It's all there on Twitter, kids. You can go back and look.
And your Twitter handle, Brian?
My head is at Brian Hezzer, which is down.
As per the screen. Good stuff.
So yes,
Brian, as you already alluded to, you are a big original 77-85 fan, with the original 3 movies. And obviously we woke up, today is the 29th of November. We woke up this morning to the sad news that Dave Prowse passed away today. And, did you meet him at any of the conventions? Do you know him?
Yeah, I didn't know him well. I've met him a few times. I sat next to him a couple of times. I was actually at the last show he did in Canada, and I think that might have been the last show he did publicly anywhere, actually. But very nice, he always had time for the fans, signed a lot of stuff for people over the years, and he was a big presence and a good egg, and of course the Green Cross Code Man, which did an awful lot of good. So while he was marauding around the galaxy being bad, he was also all over our tellies being good. So he'll be missed, and he was a great guy, and very sad.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Sad news. Moving on, we'll go back to filming, Brian, and obviously we were fortunate enough to go back, and we carried on and did Rogue One, and
yes.
And I just wondered if you could share some of your stories and characters you were involved in. Not all 54, was it?
56. Yeah.
But you
Rogue
were lucky enough to get in front of camera as well, weren't you?
Oh, I was. Yeah, that was on The Last Jedi. We noticed one day that the script supervisor, lovely Lorna, she walked through one day wearing a First Order officer's outfit. I went, hang on a minute, we didn't know this was a thing. So I approached Jamie Christopher, who was the first assistant, and because Dave and I had done our thing in Maz's castle, and we'd also when we were doing Rogue One at various points, because the way that Gareth shot that, there were cameras everywhere, so you couldn't hide. So we would be dressed in different Rebel tech outfits or pilots outfits and stuff like that. So people were walking about with remote controls under bits of kit, or hiding them behind consoles and just controlling faces and stuff like that. So we sort of, there's 2 lots. We've been in 2 now, even though we didn't make the cut for Rogue One. And so I approached Jamie Christopher, the first assistant, and said, "There's a Star Wars tradition that I'm trying to start. That me and Dave wind up in all these films." And he went, yeah, you can be it. So the upshot of it was that myself and Dave and Matt and Josh all wound up dressed as rebel soldiers in the Battle of Crate. And so I got called up to the front of the queue, me and Dave, and Matt as well. Matt's up there in the shot. And they just said, "Do you act, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I have been known." I said, "Right, we'll just start screaming orders at these guys. So if you jump to the scene where they first push into the trench, and it is literally on the DVD cut point or the Blu-ray cut point when you jump into the scene, the camera comes out the foxhole and turns immediately right, and it's just me screaming orders into the camera. There's myself, then there's Kevin Jenkins, who was the ILM art director, and then there's Dave right next to him, and he's passing Matt up a set of binoculars. You see the back of Matt's legs and stuff. So there's all 4 of us are in there. I'm not sure where Josh was at that point. He was probably up the back of the trench with Gary Barlow. But it was
that's another story for another time.
That is another story for another time. Josh was practicing his dance move. So we did that. We did the Fathiers for the Force Awakens. Sorry, not Force Awakens, for the Last Jedi. Which again, the Fathier was a full-size puppet. We only had the one, so when you saw the 6 of them come out over the stalls, that was a locked-off shot. We would do a bit, and then we push it to the next stall, and then we do it again, and then we do it again and do it again. And an ILM came in and just touched up the different puppets just to make them look like they were different animals. The Porgs, of course, that was another thing we got tasked with, myself and Dave and Damien and Colin, Damien Farrell and Colin Purvis. We were tasked with making the Porgs live. So we got these little rod puppets, and we sort of thought, okay, another design by Jake Lunt, and we just thought, well, what can we do with these? I mean, these could very well wind up being Ewoks, depending on how you feel about Ewoks. And so we spent a couple of weeks and shot a bunch of test footage with these things, and they were rod puppets, so they were about this big, and they had a rod into the back of the head and a rod into the body, and the feet were sprung, so you could make them hop around. And so one person would do the head and the body, and someone else would go sort of around them and do the wings on little rods. And they were backbreakers because you were literally hunched over in green behind them. And we'd work that out, how to do it. And as often happens with these kind of things, we suddenly get a message come down from Neil to say, we don't want you behind them, we want you off to the left and the right. So then they had to put right angle bends in all of these rods a couple of days before we went to set with them. So having learnt them one way, we then had to learn them another way. And then they took us to the top of a 300-foot cliff. I'm not kidding. Clipped us all on and just said, right, get on with that. And that shot with a lightsaber, there's footage of it on the making of, but we're all pegged to the pegged to the cliffside operating these things. And it was a straight dead. It was, next stop is the sea. And it was fairly hairy. So that was, and we did the Caretakers as well for that one. And then everything that was in the Canto Bight Casino, we were all over that. So every time you look round, there was something going on, and we would jump between characters because we kind of always work on the apprehension that not everything's going to be up at the same time. That always is not the case. So there's a big wide and everything has to work at once. But you tend to move from characters around as the camera goes. Each new setup, you jump in this, you jump in that. Sometimes specific people are assigned to specific characters, but equally, if it's an arm or the eyes or something like that, someone will just jump on and off. And occasionally, like with the Mon Calamari characters in Rogue One, and then subsequently, in the Last Jedi, several of us did the faces for those over a period of time. So you jump around. Solo, what was I doing in Solo? I was actually in a suit creature for that. So I was in this kind of parrot-faced lizard thing that was in the Sabat game, and then he showed up again on Driving Yacht in a different outfit. And so I was inside that. And then Pablo Hidalgo named that thing Here and Beering, Don't know where he got that from.
Nice touch.
Yeah, nice touch. That's one of the lovely things, actually, is because isn't there a part of BB8's head that's named after you, Lee?
Yes, yeah, the Towsley something motivator, I think it is.
Yeah, and of course you're now, aren't you, just like all over Galaxy's Edge?
That's right. Yeah, there's mugs and pins and stuff. Yeah, which is it's amazing. Yeah,
it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So
you're right. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very strange when you think that, you know, a couple of idiots from sort of in the London area have wound up A, getting the job in the first place, B, not getting fired, and then C, getting branded all over the place.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I've got to ask you, Brian, which is your favourite of the ones that you've worked on?
BB8, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, it was so much fun to do. It was a different experience every time doing it as well. The first one was just pure terror and disbelief. It was because of it, you know, it was Star Wars was coming back, and it was. I almost worked on the Phantom Menace years ago.
Oh wow! Right.
Phil Eason, who played Yaddle, which was the other Yoda character before the child arrived. He, a very good friend of mine, and I assisted him quite a lot over the years and was very good to me. And he got this job, and he was desperately trying to get me on as his right arm, and it never quite happened. And I was absolutely gutted. So when they did those movies and I didn't get to work, and I thought, well, Star Wars, I won't get to do that. But not only did I get to do it, I got to do the Star Wars I know. I got to do Han Solo, Chewbacca, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker Star Wars, you know. So that was an amazing thing. So, but there was a very, very scary. It was a very scary experience, particularly the day that we shot the scene with R2D2, C3PO, and BB8 when he finds him in the base, because that was like being asked to join Laurel and Hardy. You know, something that you're so, you both know this, that when you actually get on set and see them there, when you actually see C3PO in his full gear and it's Anthony doing it, you become immediately starstruck. And so to have to go in and then play a scene and take into not only take into consideration the meat of the scene itself, but also don't get too close to Anthony because you're wearing green and it will reflect and I have to paint it out. And also he can't really see you, so don't get too near him with the rods. And, you know, you're just generally having to work with someone who has got limited vision and limited hearing. And he really doesn't get enough credit for what he does in that suit. What he does is an amazing thing, because if you ever watch C3PO, he goes through all the emotions that you would go through in those situations, and he does it without a face. He does it without blinking. He can't look left. He can't look right. He doesn't raise an eyebrow. He doesn't open his mouth. All those things that an actor would use to emote like that, he doesn't have it. He has to do it all with a turn of his head, which he can't turn completely anyway, and a cock of his head, and do it with his voice. The man's amazing. Anyway, so the first one was a scary thing, but we got to the end of that and it worked okay, and then everybody liked it. So then we came back for the next one, and that was different again, because then we had Rian Johnson, who was a completely different speed to JJ. Lovely, another rock star director, but different. And so every time you get a new person who comes in and directs one of these movies, they have to learn about what these things do and what they don't do, and you know, and the process of working with creatures and droids and things that you can't get an instant reaction out of from their eyes, you know. So that was the second one, and then the last one was probably the one I had the most fun on, because JJ just wanted us to do what we did with the, you know, you just push that up that hill, go do it, and he knew we could do it, and so he pushed us to do more with it every time, and so we had an absolute blast on that last one. Yeah, it was. So BB8 is my favourite, and yeah, we had so much fun doing the whole thing. Yeah, it was great.
Cool, that's brilliant. That's really good, Brian. And leading on from that, you've got on to embrace the signing circuit.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, yes, I have sat down. I've written my name on a lot of toys in the last few years.
But you know, you've been fortunate enough to travel a lot, as have I. And meet a lot of wonderful people, you know, a lot of and stuff, you know, and we've missed that this year, unfortunately, lockdown. But you know, there's worse things going on. It's not the end of the world.
Well, completely, you know, it's a first world problem.
But you know, you must thoroughly enjoy it, Brian. I've worked with you on the signing circuit. You engage with the fans so well, and you know, share stories like you are now. And
yeah, well, the thing is, I used to go to them before I started attending them, so I kind of know. If you've lined up for people for a long time, and you don't have to line up long for me, because the lines aren't that long, but if you've waited to see someone, I kind of know what I would expect from them. And having seen other people, not necessarily Star Wars people, other performers that have gone along to those things, maybe not treat people so well, and see the expression on their face as they leave that line, you just think, come on, this isn't difficult. And if it is difficult, you shouldn't do it. But I will happily talk about Star Wars every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So if you want to come and just say hello, I'll happily rattle away and talk about why Last Jedi is great and you're wrong. And, you know, and I'll happily go backwards and forwards on that all day long. And, you know, I love it. So, yeah, I've enjoyed going all over the world as well, meeting Star Wars fans in different places. And while we were still making the bigger movies, I just started going out onto these things, and it was interesting to go back because while we were making them, I think we were making the last. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, Lee. We were making the Last Jedi when the first Star Wars Celebration in London happened. It wasn't the first one, but it was the first one that happened since The Force Awakens came out. And I think Rogue One had been done.
We were doing reshoots for Rogue One, and we were doing The Last Jedi as well. We just started Jedi, yeah.
So we'd done 3 of those movies before one of them had come out, really.
Yeah.
And you can, even though, and this sounds like a really weird thing, so you can get a bit jaded with the whole thing. And so, you know, because it is a job and you go in early in the morning and you work long hours, but you're making this thing. But I was lucky that I got to go out and meet some people and you realise how much it meant to them. I mean, even when they're not necessarily 100% behind what they've seen, the reason people get so upset about it is because it means so much to them.
Yeah.
And I was able to take that back to work and say that there's people out there meeting each other at cinemas, you know, falling in love, getting married, having the Star Wars music played at their funerals. And, you know, what we're doing, it isn't necessarily on a global scale important, but it is important to the people who find it important. And so I know why people get so passionate about it. And so I'm always happy to hear when people have, you know, loved something or they've really connected with something or they've not connected with something, you know, because there's not every aspect of it that I'm head over heels with. But I just find it fascinating. And when you see little kids dressed up as Ray and Finn and Poe, you know, or Kelly, you know, or Rose.
Or BB8.
Or BB8, yes. We've had a lot of that go on, which has been a lot of fun. There was a young lady, the girl was, I think, Sammy Mini Cosplay, she is on Twitter, and she's been skating around as BB8 for some time. And she showed up at a show one day, and her mother was dressed in a green onesie and had handles on the back and was pushing her around. It was hysterical. So it's been great to go, and wherever I go, I always try and find the droid builders, and then try and find the 501st or the Legion or the Mandos or whoever's there, and always sort of say hello to, you know, from us as people who've made the films to them, because without, you know, I don't know, it's a real cliche, everybody says it, but if people didn't like it, they wouldn't be able to make it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the sort of the important thing, and I always try and blag you a patch whenever I go anywhere, Lee.
I was going to get onto that. Yeah, you like a patch, don't you, Brian? You know, and you kind of get me involved in that as well. I try.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah,
2 patches, but
I don't mind. It's got silly now. I've got 2 giant sort of Tupperware rough box. You know, those what they called really useful boxes, which is just full of patches from various sort of garrisons and legions and everything. And so we're going to try and find something. We'll try and stitch them on a great big tablecloth or something for conventions and stuff. But yeah, so I always try and go out patch trading. Excuse me, so I lent in the. I'll just move my chair. Always try and. I always try and have some patches that we sort of had on crew or whatever, just so we can trade up and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's always good fun.
Brian, what's the coolest gift that you've got from a fan?
Coolest gift I got from a fan. I got given a crab shell. There you go. There's a lovely couple whose name has now completely escaped me. Turned up with a framed crab shell down in Maine or somewhere like that. They were might have been down in. They may have been in Florida, and they paint crab shells, and they painted this shell like BB8.
Oh wow!
And then
Okay.
they cleaned it, and they you know, it's clean. Obviously, they cleaned it out first. Here's a stinky shell, and they turned it into a BB8, and it's beautifully painted, and it's framed, and it was in my bathroom, and will continue to be in my bathroom when I move. So yeah, that was a really nice thing. I think what else have I been given? I get given lots. I really like it when little kids turn up having drawn me pictures, just because they bought your picture. Oh, thank you very much. And I always put them in the case, and they always go on the fridge for a bit. You know, I try to always put them on Twitter with little parents' permission and stuff. But that's always sweet because for me, again, they're you know, contrary to what we'll believe as a 50-year-old man, you know, they are kids' films.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they've got to. If kids are connecting with them, then they're doing the job. You know. So I'm just trying to think if there's any other, you know, I've had some nice stuff, but the crab shell was the thing that because it was so unusual as well. That was good.
Yeah, I've not seen that myself, Brian. We'll have to
you have to come over.
It's away now, but we'll have to try and get a photo of that at some point.
Yeah,
I'd love to see.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So what now, Brian? What's in store for Brian Herring? You know, you've got through the year with a few jobs, you know, and you mentioned Spitting Image earlier, and in the last chat we had, which is that's still going.
That finished this week. That finished this week. Right. I am on to something else, which I cannot talk about. It isn't Star Wars, but it's a belter.
Right.
It's an absolute belter, and it will see me through for a few months, and I'm very, very, very excited. So it's I think all I'll say is it's something that I've been enjoying for some time at the cinema, and I'm very, very chuffed to have been involved in this. You know, in this particular thing, and I'm looking forward to it. So we've just started that, and I'm very excited. The other thing that's going on, I've got a couple of video games coming out next year on the PS5, and I think I can say that one of them is called Lost in Random. And that will be out on the PS5. I think it's coming out through EA, and that is out. I don't know when next year. And I do a couple of voices in that, which is fun. And I'm a playable character in something else, but I can't talk about that either.
Oh wow! I genuinely don't know what that is, so I look forward to that as well.
I think it looks like it's going to be really good as well. And I've done voices for video games and animation stuff before, but I've never actually done a game where if you punch it in the face, it's me that says "ow." So, so yeah.
How many people are going to be buying that game for that?
Oh, I'd imagine an awful lot of people would like to punch me in the face and make me say "ow." So yeah, you can. I think you can commit quite considerable acts of violence on me on this one. So it will be a lot of fun. So yeah, so that's coming, and then we just, you know, I'm gainfully employed into next year, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens after that.
Excellent. Well, that's brilliant, Brian. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Always a pleasure, boys.
Appreciated. And well, this will be airing during our live show, and you know, hopefully we'll see you physically next year. We'll get you to a physical event if we
lovely.
Which would be great. But for now, thank you, Brian.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Stay safe.
Merry Christmas.
Cheers, man.
Take care, mate. Cheers.